Hi, everybody. I'm Terry Records.
Hi, I'm Jason Nordhagen.
And welcome to Should You Rent It, Flip It, or Run? This is our signature piece, and we are national real estate investment coaches, and we help investors and realtors throughout the country with their real estate needs, and more importantly, knowing when you should rent it, flip it, or run. And this is the million-dollar question, really. And we recently have been touring the United States and done this tour in other places. We do a one-day tour, a four-day tour, and cycle throughout the United States, helping investors learn these principles and get into action, fulfilling their real estate dreams. And the biggest problem I see is not a lot of realtors and people in the industry really know this information. And to be able to decide when you see a property whether you should rent it, flip it, or run immediately really requires some skill, and there's some basic knowledge you need, and then we kind of build on that. So today what we're going to do is go through a couple concepts, but let us tell you a little bit more about ourselves. I've been in real estate about 30 years and helped over 3,500 people buy and sell property, and my dream has been to do this nationally, which is what we're doing, and helping investors. And over that time period, personally, we've renovated over 350 properties, and I'm especially proud of Jason because he received a historical preservation award from the City of St. Paul architects. Those guys are hard to please, on a renovation that he did. I'm going to show you that project in a little bit. And in addition, we have mentored hundreds of clients with their real estate projects and endeavors and helped them build wealth over time. And we have 3 kids between us. We've been married only 20 years, but Adam, Nick, and Jocelyn are grown, and they live in Minnesota currently. And we'd have 2 grandsons, Zeke and Drake. And our labs are our Labrador Retrievers are our other loves now that the kids are out of the house.
Yeah, they travel with us. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, so we travel in our RV and with our motorcycle around the country doing rent, flip, or run. And so you might see us come to you, especially if you got great deals in the area. But our dream is in Montana. We like to spend time there as well. But personally, we really are fulfilled when we help others attain their real estate goals utilizing real estate as an approach. But what we're going to learn today is the big one, something that nobody is taught. I keep asking all these new realtors, I said, did they teach you this in school yet? And they're like, no. And that is something called market timing. And so what is it? And how do I know when I should invest? And how do I keep from eating my seed corn? Most of us only have so much cash to invest. And if you have a big dream, your cash doesn't take you ultimately to your dream to begin with unless you're very careful with it. Now, what is a market anomaly and how can you profit from it? We're going to talk about that today as well. And what investment strategies are best at what time? And bringing it all together at the end, we're going to give you a few really good concepts to help you be able to decide, should you rent it, flip it, or run? Our goal for every investor is to educate you. We want our investors to think like we think. We want you to be able to know all this information, like you didn't have to go through the last 30 years that I taught it to you, and you don't have to make the mistakes that I made, right? And you can go straight to go and achieve your goal, right? And so what we want you to be able to do is when you walk in a property, take this information in. If you see a good property, be able to estimate repairs on the spot, know what phase it is in the market timing cycle, know all your options for financing, and be able to do thumbs up, thumbs down. Should you rent it, flip it, or run? So our goal for you today is a golden nugget, a thought, a technique, a strategy, something to take and change your life and push you forward in your real estate endeavors. Now, I've got an opportunity for you. I have a new book coming out, and you can receive a free copy of it. And if you stay to the end, I'll tell you how to get a copy of it. My book is entitled From 5K to 6.5 million. You can too. And it's a story. It's my personal story. And back in the 90s, I was a single mom. And I took a $5,000 inheritance to $6.5 million. So I met Jason along the way. And I tell the story, but it is set back then. But the thing is, all of the concepts are relatable to today and the market timings principles. And I'm going to show you pieces of that book today because it applies to your real estate investment career. So, what's your big why? Why are you on this call today? What are you looking for? Are you looking to pay off some debt, pay for somebody's college, your college, retirement? A lot of folks, in the downturn lost a lot, and where they thought they were going to be set up for retirement, they aren't. And nowadays, all of us, baby boomers don't have the retirement that our parents maybe were set up in their jobs for. That whole arena has changed, right? Maybe you need a new business or a new home, new toys, you want to have some fun and you need a little extra money, right? Or maybe it's a business to work with your kids, or perhaps a legacy. Maybe you want to leave something to someone else or be able to provide for a philanthropic endeavor, be able to provide money and a means to achieve that goal, right? So most problems I see investors face are some of the following things. And so take note and see which ones are applicable to you. How do I get started investing? What's the best investment strategy? Who should be on my team? How do I finance my purchases? And how do I find more cash? How do I estimate these repairs? A lot of people think you've got to look at it, go get all your bids and all of that. But if you do, you're going to miss that property, right? The good deals sell immediately. What offer should I make and how should I structure it? And is now a good time in the marketplace to invest? You can invest in every market. You just have to know what type of investment and why. We're going to talk about that today. How do I find tenants? Should I manage my own property? Or if I don't have any more cash, what do I do? Should I keep my job? Or should I do all this work myself? I'm going to save some money. How do I calculate returns on investment? My cash on cash, my total return on my investment. How do I do that? And what is a good cash flow amount? What should I agree to? Should I get my real estate license? Will I learn all this stuff if I get my real estate license? The answer is no. They don't teach you any of this, unfortunately. That's why a lot of our classes, a lot of our people we coach are realtors as well. But by far, one of the biggest mistakes I find investors make is really the lack of a strategic plan and inadequate mentorship. So what I mean by that is you have an idea and you trust that any old realtor you happen to call knows what they're saying. You might even go to a local RIA group and interact with other people, although 90% of the people in those real estate investment groups are not active. I mean, they're wannabes and they don't know how to get into action. You might even pay tens of thousands of dollars to a guru to teach you. Unfortunately, Jason and I we met a couple hundred people who had done that, and they were dismayed because even though there can be a lot of information you can give people online, the personal touch, a personal mentor, nothing replaces that. And a lot of people really have trouble getting their boots on the ground into action. Maybe 1 out of 100 is successful, at really implementing those kinds of things without a personal mentorship. So that's actually where we serve that purpose, and a lot of those folks have joined us as well. So anyway, with that, you should be here today if you want something more in life and you need more cash to invest and you're open to new ideas and you're willing to take steps to achieve an ultimate goal. You're learning based and you look positively at anything. But what we're not going to give you today is any get-rich-quick scheme. Jason and I are pretty down to earth. We hope that we're approachable to folks, and we don't offer one simple alternative to making money with real estate. It requires hard work, learning, and tenacity. And few who endeavor to do it, and large sums generally do. They mostly get lost from a lack of direction or, like I said, inappropriate mentorships. So none of this information was taught to us in any real estate school. It was taught through the School of Hard Knocks. And we hope to just give you some concepts we've learned and embraced and help you be successful and avoid problems and pitfalls we and other people that we know have experienced along the way. So what we're going to do is we're we're going to start a little bit about our story. And the reason I do that is because today we're going to talk about market timing and market anomalies and a little bit about how to find more cash. It's not my biggest piece about cash because that's like an hour and a half, and I don't want to keep you that long today. I want to hit market timing and market anomalies because these are really big. And in today's current market, I just read 3 headlines this morning about it and people trying to figure out what to do and should they invest or why should they? So our story starts with me back in 1991. I was a single mom. I was getting divorced and I simply needed a place to live. So I lived in St. Paul at the time. And I bought a place on Summit Avenue on a contract for deed because I couldn't get a loan because I was getting divorced. You can't get loans when you're in the middle of a divorce. And I was a new, what I call baby realtor. Anybody less than 4 years in the business, I call you a baby realtor because unless you do, until you get about 400 transactions under your belt, you really don't know what you're doing because it's the school of hard knocks and trials and tribulations. So I was still a new baby realtor and I didn't have regular income to qualify because I was newly self-employed. Anyway, I needed a place to live. Yeah, I could have rented an apartment, but I would have been throwing money out the window. And I knew if I just simply bought something and I didn't even have the money to fix it up, I would be money ahead because it would probably appreciate by the amount of my mortgage payment each month, which was $1,500. So I moved in. But this is kind of an interesting property. It's a brownstone, and so it was a row house. You own the wall, a common wall. And F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote This Side of Paradise next door to my unit. His is the bay window in the center here, and mine is the one in the center with a front porch. It was 4,000 square feet. It had 30 amp service, paneling, drop ceilings, bats, lots of mice, no garage, and lots of space and a huge heating bill. But I did it, and I had to figure out how to make money. So what did I do? I busted my butt, did tons of open houses, did anything nobody else would do in those days. The realtors didn't have any interest in condominiums because they were like $15,000 to $40,000. They weren't going to make any money on them. And the prices just kept dropping because the banks kept trying to sell them in horrible foreclosure condition. So I became the little condo queen of St. Paul in a short period of time by showing the banks that if I renovated it for them, painted and carpeted, I could get more money, and then they would not affect the whole condominium complex from going into foreclosure or going as deeply into foreclosure as what was happening. So I ended up with these listings on Dale Street, and Dale Street is a very busy street in the city of St. Paul. It is adjacent, pretty close to the freeway, and it was at that time 100% rental, right? Pretty much 100%. And high crime, busy street. And I listed this property for the bank, and it was also a row house. So it looks like a duplex, but it's not. It's half of the building, and they were listed for $12,900 a piece. Now, I don't want you to turn off and say, well, there's not any houses in my area this price. This is about market timing. You can buy in every market, and later on, we bought similar properties to this, maybe 100,000 more, and it all made sense if I understood the whole gamut of real estate investing, right? So the price is relative. I want you to get the concepts today, right? So the bank guy says, I want you to stand there all weekend and hold a sealed bid auction. I'm like, really? Nobody's ever done that. But back in the day, I said I'm willing to try. So I did. It was winter in Minnesota, no heat. It was condemned. So I stood there all weekend like a new baby realtor would, eager. Nobody came. One guy came. No, he didn't even come. He put a sealed bid in, but he'd made an offer before. But as I stood there all weekend and nobody came, because nobody wanted this thing, right? And I'd done advertising, so I thought, well, my grandfather just left me $5,000. I'd give him my $5,000 for this, and I guess I better own the other half because both units were for sale. I said I better control the building, so I'll buy it. I think I can get money off my credit card. So I did, and I offered him $5,011 each. And now my problem was I'd eaten my seed corn, and how do I pay for this rehab, right? So I just worked, and I never lifted a finger in the building, never lifted a finger in any of my buildings. We only lifted a finger in one of Jason's buildings, and that story's to come. And anyway, hired people to do it, figured out my contractors, whatever, earned enough to fix it up, eventually had to fill it up with tenants. I didn't know who was going to rent it. Welfare gals with kids came in, they rented it, Section 8 paid, $650 aside. Great, now I've got more money into it, and still my seed corn's eaten, right? So what did I do? I started busting my hooves to find some financing. But we were in something called, note this, the early time of absorption. And so at that point, it's hard to get financing. We're going to talk more about this later. And so I had to really work at it and work at it and work at it. I didn't even know what absorption was in these days. I wasn't taught this concept until many years later. But eventually I found a bank that would finance me. After I gave my mom, I let her become my mortgager or whatever. I can't get those two terms right sometimes. But anyway, she lent me some money, and I owed her, so therefore they would refinance this thing. So they refinanced it. I put $25,000 aside. They didn't appraise for $40,000. Now this was about a year later, and I had my tenants in there, and they were cash flowing about $332 per unit. You always want to know your numbers. And I proceeded to just rent it, right? And I realized that maybe this just paid for my car payment. So I wonder if I can do this again and pay for my house payment. So I started dreaming a little bigger. And so I set off, and before I knew it, I'll come back to this story and finish it in a sec, I ended up buying other properties, fixing them up, and I had about 25 units when I got a big call. But I'm going to go finish this story, because what happened over time, remember, number one is it was a transitional neighborhood. This was a place where nobody wanted this deal, right? And I kept this property for about 10 years. It was appreciating in value. You could see after I fixed it up, it was worth 40. A couple years later, the rents, there was pressure on the rents, so I raised the rents. And as I raised the rents, I'm like, well, my cash on cash return is going down. It went up when I raised the rents, but I wonder if the value is higher. If the value is higher, my cash on cash return is going down. So therefore, I refinanced. They were worth $80,000 aside, but I was getting at that point $850 each side. So it still worked to do that, right? It went on for about 10 years. And one day I got a call from the neighbors. Remember, I said it was 100% rental. And the neighbors said, well, your tenants did this, your tenants did that, blah, blah, blah. And by then I was with Jason, and I said, oh my gosh, I said, you know what? My tenants didn't do anything bad. These gals, they're living the same life they've always lived. And the only thing that's different is the neighbors. The neighbors changed, so it's not rental anymore. There were homeowners living around them. The neighborhood around, as it got renovated, had more and more owners move into it, and they didn't like my tenants, which was tough, no geese. But, however, I had an opportunity, because at that point I realized that my rents had just raised to $1,200 per side. So what did that mean? That meant that probably my value was higher, so I could refinance this baby again, because each time I did that, I got my seed corn back, or even additional cash. So I got no money into this thing long time ago now, right? So I could refinance it again. If I got $1,200 aside, it's probably worth $120 aside now, right? Or is it time to do something else? So I decided it was probably time to do something else, and the year was about 2000-ish. And I told Jason, I said, let's renovate. I'm not sure what they're worth, because nothing like this has sold. It's on a very busy street. Maybe we can get $139 for each side if we renovate. And I got a girlfriend to help us, and she is really good at decorating. Her name was Kathleen Turner, like Kathleen Turner romancing the stone, but Kathleen Turner was romancing the home. And she taught me how to stage a house, and helped us pick out colors and surfaces, and encourage us to put bathrooms in. And we were learning, right? And so Jason put in architectural detail, and got rid of all the paneling, and got rid of the 60s woodwork, and put in vintage woodwork, right? Restuccoed, and it was beautiful. So the price kept raising in the middle of the rehab, and we ultimately got the $215 and $235. So what happened is, it was an anomaly, so in the beginning, buying that property. So notice what I want you to get. This is a huge lesson, this property. If I could speak all day to this property, because nobody wanted that deal. So what deals are out there that nobody wants that could be potentially good for you in the future, right? That's an anomaly, because at some point somebody wants that deal. When we sold this later, they were busting the door down to buy these units at those prices. What is that about? Okay, so that's one thing. And so cash flow and being able to refinance and get your seed corn again, but being educated about whether you go ahead and keep refinancing or not. Now, if I had started refinancing and my rents were still low, that wouldn't have been very smart, because I would have given up my cash flow. So at about the year 2001 is when Jason and I realized that other people were buying and refinancing like mad because these prices were high. And we're like, we're not comfortable because the rents were not going up anymore. And at that point, we sought out in the marketplace another alternative, and that was a group that taught us the concept of market timing that we're going to show you shortly. But the cool thing in all of this, as I kept doing it and teaching myself, and what happened is a few years, so probably 4 or 5 years later, I got a phone call, and it changed my life forever. And on the other line was a fellow asking me about this property. It was a property I had listed. It was a 3-bedroom, and a 1-bedroom apartment upstairs, triplex, for $73,900. And he had been listening to Carlton Sheets, and his name was Mark, and his partner's name is John. And they were very excited. They wanted to build wealth with real estate, but they'd had trouble finding an agent who knew anything. And so I patiently told them what I'd been doing, and we set upon, I was their realtor, and we went looking for property. They did buy this property, and over the course of the next few years, I sold them lots of properties. So I actually took them from having a credit card to being multimillionaires. And more importantly, what happened with them is they introduced me to my husband, my now husband, Jason. And Jason, will you tell them a little bit about your story?
Sure. I'd moved to town actually for personal reasons. My daughter was in the area, and I wanted to stay close to her and be able to see her. She was young at the time. So I moved to town and took a job driving truck. My background had been in construction, so I really liked renovating, the idea of renovating homes. I'd helped people with it, but I've never personally owned any at that time. So Mark is someone that I knew, Mark and John both, and they said, well, if you're moving to this area, we have a place you can live, and I even have a spot where you can. I had a commercial driver's license, and they said, well, we can help you get a job over here of driving truck too. So I did that, and but that really wasn't where my heart was. So I had my 3-day weekends, and I was helping them renovate their properties on the weekends. The thing that I noticed right away was they were really sitting financially a lot better than I was. They'd been doing well with these properties. So I started asking them about numbers and how much those buildings were costing, and I kind of knew what the rents were because I was paying a lot of money just to live in that 3rd floor unit. The rents were pretty high, and everything was working for them, and the energy was very good. They were excited about what they were doing, and I wanted to do it. So, but see, I knew nothing about financing. I knew nothing about this business end of it. And I went out and looked for a realtor to find me a house on my own, just picked one out of a magazine. And this person said, you're doing the right things, but you got a tough credit history. I know I can see here you've been working on it for a couple of years, but you're not there yet. Talk to me in 6 months or a year. And for me, I thought that was probably, how it was going to be. So anyway, I was sent eventually to Terry, who sat me down, got my goals out of me, and said, sure, you can do this. There's no problem with doing this. Let's talk to my financing person and see if you're qualified. She did that. I got qualified. I started buying properties. But she was guiding me. I had no idea how to go about this. So I did need to get a hold of some startup money now that I was pre-approved through the right person. She mentioned a few different ways. Is there any family members? I talked to my mom, and she was able to come up with some money to get me started. $30,000 and we got started. So that first property, one of the first properties we found, it had burst plumbing and a bad furnace and hot water heat. So I wasn't sure how to do any of the, am I going to use up all my money in that one, or can I keep going? Didn't know, but I know I needed to figure some of this stuff out. And Terry guided me through that with, okay, you can buy this, you can fix it, and you can get your money back afterwards to keep going. So we did that. And in the long run, what I ended up doing was buying 4 properties altogether, two duplexes, 2 single-family homes to live in. And what was interesting about that is I didn't have any intention of flipping any of those properties. I just wanted rentals. I wanted cash flow per month. That's how Terry had sat me down and showed me that if I got the right cash flow per month, I could replace my job income. So we did that. And my idea was to keep these properties. I kind of thought I'd just have these 4 properties forever. And in 6 months' time, actually, she was able to find me all 4 of these properties, which was enough money to quit my job and replace it. But I renovated these properties on a tight budget and just put renters in. And that's later I figured out that actually was a great way to do it, because tenants don't always take care of the property the way you would. So if you do a full renovation to begin with, you can end up being in trouble at the end.
Yeah, I remember in the beginning you were like, oh, I want to go do this, I want to go do that. And I'm like, just sit on your fingers and don't touch it, because if you go do that, you're going to end up renovating it all over again.
And she was right. The other thing that I learned through doing some of this the hard way was wanting to do everything myself. And Terry sat back and watched me do that on one of these first properties. As a matter of fact, I was so excited when I bought it. We were dating at the time. I didn't realize it was Valentine's weekend, and I just closed on it. I was so excited to get going. I ordered a dumpster, and Terry said, "What are you doing this weekend?" I'm like, "Oh, got a dumpster coming. I'm gonna fill the dumpster." So we ended up spending our first Valentine's Day together filling a dumpster, even though she says she doesn't really work on the properties. But I learned how to do this, and the financial part was, it came to me. You learn it as you go on some of this, but the idea was I had Terry and I had Mark and John, and they were doing it. So in a sense, they were my mentors. I was just in the middle of it, and I had no intention of flipping these properties, yet the time came when, we were looking and analyzing the numbers, and it's like, this is a great time to sell this property. Look at the money you can make. You can tax defer it into other things and all these things I didn't know about. But it replaced my job. It got me back into working for myself, which was my goal. Mm-hmm. And that was great. And then from there, Terry and I got together and went on and did many more properties.
We ended
hundreds.
Up 100. At one point, we had 100 rental units, and that had been the goal. I had not written down 99 units. I had not written down 101. We got to 100. I should have revised that goal. Hindsight's foresight. But anyway, along the way, we did a lot of buying and holding. Mm-hmm. We did flips. We did short sales. We did all kinds of things. We did prehabs. And so different strategies worked at different times, right?
Yes. And one very interesting thing that I did learn along the way was, our best money makers, our best deals, much like the deal Terry just showed you, we have a few examples that were big home runs. They didn't start out being, wow, this is the deal everybody wants, I got to have this. It was being out there doing it and looking for a good deal, and then seeing, it works, so you see what happens with it. And in the end, some of those just made us huge money, even though we didn't start out to flip it. We did 880 Wilson and made $150,000 selling it just because
we bought it for cash
flow.
Bought
it to keep, and then the market was so crazy, everybody wanted it. and we said, let's see how much they'll pay. And they did. Right away, they gave us a huge profit.
So everything works. It's just a matter of figuring out your strategies and getting started. I mean, so many people, and getting started, though, with the right person mentoring you, so that you're not misled. I mean, I did have a client recently where he said, oh, I'm so excited. I was in corporate America, and he got a big severance for so many months, and he had some money in the bank, and I met him after he'd bought 5 properties. He was very excited. He said, I bought 5 flips last month. Do you want to see them? I said, sure. And I went and saw the properties, and they indeed were fix-up properties, but they were not flips. They were called rental properties because, unfortunately, even though he was even fixing them up to a T so that it was so perfect, it should be sold, but there was no room in the numbers because he had hooked up with just any old realtor who didn't know how to help him fulfill his flip dream, right? You needed to have a little more space in there. And so therefore, there was no room to sell them. And he has rental properties, and he has a job now too. He was going to be a big time investor, and unfortunately he blew all his money being excited and being misled. So don't let that be you, okay? So you can be a traditional, these are my slang terms. This is my slang. If you buy and sell, you're a traditional investor, right? If you buy it, you fix it, and you sell it, you're kind of short-sighted. That's the tricky flip. That's the flipper guy, right? Because your realtor's happy and the tax guy's happy. I had a guy call me this week. He's like, oh, I saw you a few months ago, and anyway, he should have hired me. And he says, and I went and bought some stuff in Texas, and I flipped them, and now my accountant says I have a huge tax problem. I'm like, well, yeah. So anyway, I could have solved that for him. So you want to be smart about what you're doing. You can't, if you just flip property, they're going to take half of it from you pretty much. If you buy it, you fix it, you refinance it, and then you rent it. I call you a cash savvy investor. Now, a tricky flipper is the person who sells things. They buy it, rent it, fix it up, sell it with a tax deferred exchange, and kind of keep everything going. You're like juggling balls, right? And if you keep doing that a long time, I call you a very smart lifer investor with rich heirs, because when you die, your kids inherit it with the current tax laws. They inherit it, and it gets a stepped up basis. So everything you've depreciated over those years, they get it. They get it back up to whatever the value was today, can sell it and not pay any tax. Yay. Buy, fix it, and sell your principal residence every 2 years. Now, in the beginning, I put that slide in there purposefully where I lived next door to F. Scott, right? Because it's really important to play what I call the principal residence game. We're not going to go into detail about it today, but it is a really great way for you to buy and not pay any tax and be able to sell every 2 years, every 2 of the last 5 years.
And you can get in with such low interest money that it really is attractive. That's one thing you taught me right away was, it's a great tip.
Investors have to put a lot bigger down payments. So we got to preserve that seed corn, right? So some of the types of investment strategies, and they all work. Some techniques work better at certain time periods in the market cycle, which is what we're leading up to, right? Buy and holds, buy, fix it, flip, buy, fix, sell. Prehabbing, that means just kind of putting lipstick on something or cleaning it out. Becoming a private lender, lending out money. The stock market, some people would rather be a private lender than be in the stock market today, so that's a great opportunity. Buy and holds, renovate it and sell it. Sell with 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. Wholesaling, that means getting the property and not actually owning it, giving the opportunity to somebody else. So with that, what we're going to talk about now is market timing. So Jason and I, we gotten together, we got married in about 1999, and about 2000, 2001, I was getting worried. I'd been in the market building this portfolio for 10 years, and I'd seen some steady growth. And I was trying to seek something else out. Now, if you think about it, 2001 is before the big boost went up and prices went really high in a lot of areas. But I was already leery because at that point prices seemed to have some pressure, but rents were not rising anymore. So I thought, what's going on here? I wonder if there's another market I should invest in. And I found a group that I actually hired as a coach at that time, and they said, yes, there's something called market timing, which is, I'm giving you this free coaching information today. And so what they said is there's 3 phases to every market cycle. And what I'm going to show you right now, this this slide shows four, but I'm going to show you the cycle and how I like to explain it to you right after this. So look down here at phase 1, the recovery. So think about your market as we talk about these concepts and try and pinpoint where your market is in any cycle, right? Phase 1, recovery. You have a declining vacancy rate and really no construction going on in your marketplace. So then what happens is over time you still have declining vacancy, but there's pressure, and now new construction, those guys have figured out how to get their financing together and they start up. So that is our expansion, right? And as we get to phase 3, we end up, all of a sudden we broach the point where there's too much extra vacancy, so the vacancy rate starts to get harder to fill vacancies, right? So knowing the rental market's really key, and watching that on the other side. If you're doing you're being an investor, you want to know what's going on with rents, because it kind of foreshadows what's to come, right? So then new construction's going full force, and we have an increasing vacancy rate, so we end up in hyper supply as there's pressure on that. So increasing vacancy and the houses get finished and they're not building so much anymore becomes a recession, right? So that's one way to look at that. Another way is I want you to think about it in a cycle like this. See the circle in the 3 phases. Note the colors of my arrows, and this is my way of explaining this to you. I made this graph, and some people think there's a 4th part to this cycle called equilibrium. It could be, but I kind of think we're either teetering one way or the other. Where there's slow, we can be in a slow phase and stagnant at a certain spot, but it's cyclical, and so different than what I just showed you. I want you to see that this is a circle and it's a cycle. So what goes up comes down, and you can't go from decline to expansion. You go from one to the next to the next. See the arrows, right? So green is absorption, and that means buy. Yellow means be careful, and decline means there's other opportunities, be careful as well, right? So let's talk about each of these phases now. And the absorption phase, so the absorption phase is really the green arrow here, right? So it's characterized by the number of properties slowly decreasing during this time period. The government might offer incentives to try and stimulate people during this phase, and unemployment stabilizes. So in a decline, remember our last decline, there was a lot of high unemployment, right? And as jobs started getting better, it went down. Near the end of this phase, some of the lenders eased their lending practices. So let's look back at this circle again. And when I got started, it was 1991 on those properties. I put some time periods. This is a Minnesota time thing here, right? Each market's different. We live in Southwest Florida full time, when we're home. That's where we hail from now. But in Florida actually was a little bit different time period. Each market can be different. This is a Minnesota one. So 91, it was the beginning of absorption, but nobody knew it was the beginning. So usually when you're at the beginning of the green arrow, you don't really know it. It's kind of like a year or two later, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, that was the bottom of the down, right? Because people are still worried, are we declining more? Are we declining more? And so then all of a sudden you get a little bit farther into the green and they're like, oh yeah, that was the bottom. And so that happened to us recently in Southwest Florida. We got to Southwest Florida about 2013. And a year or so later, you look back and you're like, oh, okay, that was the bottom, And so for an investor, the absolute best time to get into the market is at the bottom of the green. But you don't always know you're there, right? So you're taking educated risk when you get involved. And so when I got involved in 91, nobody else wanted my deals, right? So I was really in the beginning of that downturn, right? But how could you lose at 12,900 as long as you could put a tenant in there, right? Right. Same thing happened this last downturn. There were so many opportunities, but there were a lot of vacancies while people were being foreclosed. And then once they got foreclosed on, they had to find rental property, and then that put pressure on rents, and then rents increased. So think about it. Let's think about that last downturn. If people are in our house and they're being foreclosed, they stay because it's free. And depending on the state that you're in, some states foreclose by advertisement and some of them sue. The states that sue, Florida, take a long time to resolve foreclosures, and they'd had a lot of houses sell during that expansion time period, so it took a long time to work through that inventory. So they were in that decline longer than other states. Now, Minnesota is an advertisement state for foreclosures, so they can resolve a foreclosure in 6 to 9 months and take it over and change it over and change that whole picture. That's a lot different than hiring an attorney and going to court and taking a year or 2 or 5, which is what happened in Florida. So that market actually healed quicker than Southwest Florida. And you'll see that in the current marketplace as well. It's at a different place in the time clock, as we call this a time clock. We start to talk, Jason and I talk about this like it's a clock. 12 o'clock's at the top, 6 o'clock, 3 and 9. And my clients, once you've been through this, you'll say, Terry and Jason, what time is it? What time is it in this market? What time is it in this market? Because then we can relate to the same thing, right? So during the absorption, I want to talk more about that financing. What happens is, so for example, when I bought that property and I wanted to get my seed corn back and refinance it, and I kept getting no's, that's because I was in the beginning of this green cycle, right? Because what do lenders do? They lend money based on what happened, what's their experience. So they're looking back to the red. So they're saying, no, we're not doing it. But as time goes on, they look back and they start to see some green and they say, okay. So as you move through this green, more and more financing opportunities become available in every market. So what you have to do, depending on where you're at in the cycle, is you have to know what's coming. So when we were in that absorption time period, we kept looking. And every 6 months, we'd find a new product. And that was what I called an anomaly. Something was new is there and we could take advantage of it. We found, for example, a rehab loan that nobody else knew about. I think we were the only ones in town took advantage of it. We probably, between us and Mark and John, we put in 60 properties on that rehab program before everybody else kicked on or before that program went away. Another anomaly was when all of a sudden there was something called a cash out refinance on rental property. During the beginning of the green, they won't have that product. Near the middle of the green, they will unroll that product. So when that product came on one day, my loan officer called and said, I've got cash out refinances, Terry. And I said, really? How many can you do? She said, oh, they didn't tell me. I said, they're going to tell you, they're going to limit you, so we're going to do them all right now. She said, you got to be kidding me. I said, all 34 that I owned it that day. And so we refinanced them. We took out $750,000. You might think that was reckless. No, it was not reckless because their interest rates had been on those. Actually, those loans we had at that time were 10.5% rehab loans with a different local bank, right? And so what we did is we refinanced to 8.5% loans with a traditional bank. So we got a lower interest rate because the rates were actually falling. So overall, our payments only went up $150 to take out $750,000. And instead of wasting that money, what did we do? We went and bought 15 more properties, and then we renovated, put roofs on, did new kitchens, put on new furnaces, whatever needed to be done in our rentals. We top graded our properties so they were worth more money in addition. So that's really good, educated way to use leverage. So, and we created more cash flow out of that. That's how it gave us a big boost to get to our 100 unit goal. And so we knew because we had a goal to get to 100 units that when that opportunity became available, we knew to take advantage of it. Now, the other people in my office didn't have a goal about investment real estate, and they didn't even know it was an opportunity in their face. They never picked up the phone and told their investors the opportunity was there because they never saw it was an opportunity. They didn't understand what could happen because that's not what they did, right? So you want to have the right mentor. All right, so absorption, the banks start loosening up, right? So This is the absorption phase, and then the expansion phase is characterized by a decreasing inventory of homes. So this is kind of when everybody's starting to get on the bandwagon, right? There's competing offers, there's lower standards to obtain financing sometimes. They start making it easier because when they look back in the green, there's more not foreclosures because everything's moving up. It might move up a lot in price, but it generally was like it heals more slowly, right? So then the lower unemployment, things are going on, it's pretty good economy. So this might sound familiar now. And so here's the decline phase. So when we get to the decline, this is what could happen. It could be characterized by an increasing inventory of homes. So these kinds of things, watching your inventory of homes is critical in knowing what part of the market you're in. So you should be monthly watching. Now, it could be 1 month. There's an increasing number of homes. Like Southwest Florida recently experienced this, and we don't know if it's heading into an adjustment period or if it was because of red tide. So for a couple months, they had an increasing number of homes. So it panicked some people. So some people might negotiate more than they had been before. So that creates opportunity for others. Is it an anomaly, meaning it's only really short-lived, and when the snowbirds get back, it'll pick up? Or is it a real decline? Well, we won't know until 6 months. Once you watch statistics for 6 months. But if you are really into your marketplace, you will know when things are going to be permanent or not, right? So I knew the last downturn was coming because gas prices, I knew January 1st of 06 that I couldn't fix anything for anybody anymore. Now, when did it come out for the United States? The end of 07, 08 is when you learned about it. Well, all of my investors had a year and a half to adjust and get rid of, right? Because I had said, the fat lady has sung, it's over. We got to do something here because it's changing. And you know why I knew that? It's because the cost of gasoline. The cost of gasoline is how I knew the market was going to be broken, because I'd seen people buy houses that didn't have extra cash. A lot of the rental population had left the rental pool and they became homeowners, but they didn't have a lot of extra cash if the roof was leaking or if the furnace broke or if gas prices went up. So if gas prices went up over $1.50 a gallon, which they did, they had a choice to make. They only had so much money at the end of the day. They needed to eat. They needed to pay for their electric bills, so they had heat, and they needed to pay for their gas to get to work, and they needed to go to work, and then they had their house payment. So what were they going to give up? The house payment was going to go. So I knew it was a matter of 6, 9 months or a year, and we were going to see a lot of foreclosures. So I actually changed my business. I started doing foreclosures and short sales and selling those opportunities to those people who were listening. So there's always, depending on what's going on in the marketplace, you might have a pause when you're like saying, okay, I'm gonna sit here and see what's going on for a few months and see which direction. Is it really at the end yet or not, right? And then there's other opportunities that come your way. So the decline phase doesn't have to be characterized by higher interest rates. If the government last time, our interest rates were very low, and that was because back in the heyday of the previous decline, our interest rates were very high. So the government was tries to keep us, from going in a decline, because the last thing anybody wants is a decline during their administration, right? So when the government interferes, it will create an anomaly or an opportunity for you, but beware, it will cause whatever's happening to last longer. So in the last decline, when we were adjusting, and actually something called the affordability index was off, and it needed to adjust in order to make the average home affordable for the average guy, because it was kittywampus by about 30-40%. The governments thought, well, we're in a decline. We're going to keep this. We're going to fix this thing. So what did they say? They said, oh, we're going to give an $8,000 tax credit to anybody who didn't buy already, which was basically Jason's and my children, because only the younger people hadn't bought, because anybody who could buy before bought during that 5-year boom, right? So those people all bought, but unfortunately, it had not counteracted the total force of the, we were still off in our affordability index. So therefore, the government only offered that incentive for 1 year. And I sold 230 some houses that year. But what happened the next year is they didn't offer the incentives. So therefore we went down. So we had a double dip down. We had a little bit of an adjustment and then we came back down, but it's cyclical. So it wasn't done adjusting. And then everybody got very scared. And as it started dropping, fear caused people to freeze and not do anything, which caused it to drop even more, even lower than where it needed to be. So it's a really interesting concept, and it is. Catastrophic events can force you in and out, like, Detroit, when they had trouble with their jobs and all of that a couple years before the rest of the economy, when we were all booming, they were hurting. So they went into a downturn a lot earlier, right? 9/11, after 9/11, we were hovering right at the end of absorption, early expansion, and that's when the government got worried. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't want this to be a decline in my administration, so let's put some pressure on these banks to give out loans, and instead of needing these three things to get a loan, which was job, cash, and credit, people will only need two of those things. So anybody without good credit or anybody without a job, think about that. Anybody without any cash could buy a house for not just 1 year, not 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, for 5 flipping years. So that was a lot of people, which caused a lot of price increase, a lot of demand, a lot of competition, and it caused us to fall in those areas where there was a lot of buying going on during that time period. Those areas fell by that much or more. Some areas I saw 85% losses. Some cities did not, depending on how severe your increase and decreases were. So lots of factors to consider. Something you want to be constantly talking about and learning about. If you hang around us, you'll always be hearing about this because this is what we live and breathe. We want to know where we're at in this cycle at all times. Now, I've alluded to market anomalies. So what are they? These are just a couple ideas, like in Southwest Florida I wrote down. So if the affordability index is still good, that's good. That means the average person can afford the average house, or they can get more house than what is average. That's good. Small upscale. Anomalies are things that are there now and they might not always be there, right? And so you might take advantage of them and then they might be gone in the future. So you want to take advantage of it fast, So for example, when foreclosures and short sales, when there's a bunch of them, if you're in an area where there's probate, if there's new construction going on or grant money, or we were up in Raleigh recently, and there's a nice triangle of all this tech, and there's a lot of techs relocating. And also techs are thinking, if they work from home, why do I have to live in this state? Why don't I go live in the state of my dream, right? So a lot of people are starting to move to areas that they want to be in because they can work remotely, right? Because so much is online now. Do you have populations migrating to your area or interest from other countries? Sometimes, if the dollar is weak or strong, it will cause a certain population to invest in certain areas in our country, and things will boom or not boom. They will slow down based on if the dollar gets if their dollar gets weak with us, right? If it's easy for them to buy, then they buy. So it's pretty interesting. Everything's online. Few people have retirement. They need a retirement, like MLMs. They're an anomaly and they're probably here to stay. It's a way to come up with some other income. People need more income. Tiny houses, that tiny house craze. It doesn't have to be on wheels. You can renovate a tiny house and you actually can get a mortgage for that. You can't get them when they're on wheels, right? Marijuana. Some places it's legal, and those areas are booming. We went to Colorado, Denver area recently and saw some interesting things there. Oil in a certain market can cause it to boom. If the oil gets cheap, then the area can become a ghost town too. Millennials getting in the marketplace. A lot of them saw their parents get beat up with the market. Like I said, anomalies are types of financing. They're businesses that look like they might go. What other kinds of things? Anything about that, Jason, you want to throw in there? Microbreweries were for a while, all kinds of things. So you want to just be aware. It isn't necessarily always just real estate related. It's a trend. It's something that's happening around you and it's changing. And so you want to be on the cusp of that. You don't want to read it. Anytime you read something in the paper, you were too late. Okay, so get that. Anytime you read something in the paper, you were too late. If you were in tune, you will be talking about that, and then in a few months you'll read it in the paper. Then that's when you know what you're watching your market, right? You're in control. So I want you to review your current market data. You always want to look at what's something called your absorption rate. How long does it take at the rate we're selling houses per month to sell the total inventory out if we don't list anymore? So Denver a couple months ago was 1.9 months. Minneapolis, St. Paul was 2.1 months. Southwest Florida after red tide was 5.6 months. Once we get to 6 months or more, you're in a buyer's market. There's different types of opportunities to buy in buyer markets and seller markets, right? Is new construction going or not? What's the average days on the market? What percentage of your sales are cash? What's the average sale price, the median price? And how many transactions are taking place in any particular price range? Now, you might think a particular price range is a great deal. I showed a $950,000 property to an investor a couple years ago in Cape Coral. And he was very excited because it was the after repaired value was 1.4. And I told him we estimated the repairs on the spot at $150,000. And you might wonder why I didn't write that deal up. And I said, no. I said, listen, now let's look at our data. So at that point, in that market, $1 million houses weren't, $1.5 million houses were not selling in that neighborhood very fast. It was just timing in the market. Today, there's a lot more houses like that, but I couldn't tell him I could sell that house right away. It might take me 2 years. So what is his holding costs on that? It might not be as good a deal. How many transactions are taking place in a particular price range? Now, if you're doing the numbers on a price range and there's 40 transactions in a month in your neighborhood, within a half a mile or a mile, that's good. If there's only one like yours, you're an anomaly, then that might be a problem depending on what you're doing. Now, if he wanted to buy that property and live in it and renovate it and wait for the market to the time period, because there would be a time period when that price range would move more quickly in that area. It was still in its absorption time period. And it was still healing. So if people could afford $1 million houses at that point, they chose to go buy them in Bonita and Estero or in Naples. But when those houses in Bonita and Estero and Naples became $2 million, then they came to that area of Cape Coral and bought them. That's just the way buyers buy the best of what they can buy generally, what they perceive they can buy, right? It's of anything. Renters do the same thing. So what are the current trends? What's going on with the stock market? What's going on? What are people worried about? What are the economic projections? What is your Chamber of Commerce saying? What are they working towards? I love it when they're trying to open up more air flights, right? Because they're trying to get more people into your community. I've been to a lot of meetings like that, and that's a good thing. Or what are they trying to develop? What commercial buildings are going on? Commercial real estate sells at different times than residential. It's generally lagging a year or two behind the residential market. So we've talked a little bit about eating your seed corn, and it's very, very important. And we'd like to work with you directly to help you be strategic with that, so that you can replenish your cash. Because if you just spend it and not employ strategic financing principles, you're just going to buy one property, right? You're not going to get anywhere. A couple concepts in addition to traditional financing, private and hard money, which I'm not getting into today, but a couple underused tactics are self-directed IRAs, whether you have one or someone else's, or they can actually become your private lender as long as they're not blood relatives to you. So it's a really great way to get involved in the real estate market with those. And reverse mortgages for anyone that's 62 years or older. You see Tom Selleck on TV, and it kills me that he's like in his 70s already. He's such a hunk. But, reverse mortgages, he's talking about you need more money to live on. Yes, you could, if your house had lots of equity, have them pay you per month. But another thing you can do is you can take out a chunk. Say your house is worth $300,000. Chances are they'll give you $150,000 cash. You don't even have to make monthly payments. You can. The interest is due, but it's not due, but it can be paid. It's accruing. Or you can lend that money to somebody else, or you can take that money and we can go buy a couple projects. Reverse mortgages are only for people who intend on staying in their house forever. As soon as you move out of your house for 6 months, that mortgage becomes due. They do not take your property. You just pay off what you owe, right? Plus interest, any interest that's accrued. So it's really not as big and scary as some people think it is, but it's worth exploring and understanding. We're going to do some talks on this real soon, and for appropriate clients, we work on this directly to see if it's a strategic maneuver you can make. The power of leveraged assets. Should you leverage your principal residence or not? Sometimes that's a really cheap way to get cash in order to keep investing. Or I've run into a few investors recently who have investment properties that are paid off. And did you know that when your investment property has a lot of equity, your cash on cash return decreases? So this one fellow I met, he was retired, but his wife wasn't, but he had a house paid off that was a rental. And I said, if we put a little loan on this, we can use this and go buy 3 rental properties, and you still will have cash flow here, and then you will have enough cash flow that your wife can retire. He said, oh, he thought he needed to flip property, which really didn't help him achieve his goal, right? So we did that, and she retired, and they bought a motorhome and traveled the United States. So someone else can leverage their property and become your private lender too. So should you rent it, flip it, or run? I want you to know it's knowledge and a practice skill. And what do you do when you don't know all the answers? So what you should do is follow a model. There are proven strategies that work for you. I know when I was going through when I learned how I took 5,000 to 6.5 million, I didn't have a model. There weren't any books written at the time. I read any books that were out there. And about 7 years later, a client said to me, I remember he's a pharmacist. He says, Terry, what books are out there about this topic, what you're doing? I said, well, I don't know. I haven't read any. I've been so busy, I haven't read any books. I went and bought all the books in the bookstore because you had to buy them in the bookstore in those days. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. And so Kiyosaki wrote the book on it while I was doing it. One of my clients said, he calculated, he says, you had more properties than he did. I don't know that that's true. But I was doing it. It's actually the same model. So, if you follow something that's proven, then you're going to make fewer mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes anyway, but the fewer you make, the faster you get to where you go. And you don't want to be like the other client I made where he called the wrong realtor and now he has a job.
I know. I was so fortunate to meet you when I did, in more ways than one, of course. But but when I met you, you were far along the road of figuring all this out. You'd been doing it for 10 plus years, and it saved me so many mistakes, things that I never would have known. I was able to just jumpstart and get going and change my job and replace my income in 6 months, and it just made all the difference. And I would have been totally lost without having that personal guidance in how to get going and how to get my money back and how to stay going. So
well, thank you.
And it allowed us to do so many nice things along the way too. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
So
thank you. And we really makes us glow to help share that with other people. And the other thing you might do is hire a coach. We did. Actually, we ended up spending, I was figuring the other day, I thought it was at $108,000, but I just remembered I paid that other group. So I'm $110,000 over the years on learning investment principles. In addition to everything I learned on my own, right? But $60,000 I spent just to learn private and hard money because I didn't have a mentor. My realtors in my office, nobody was doing what I was doing ever. I was always ahead of the game, so I had to hire somebody to help me. And I don't necessarily think you need to spend $60,000 at all to do that, but sometimes the right person appears at the right time, and you may decide to do something. So my question to you is, knowing all these concepts, is that enough? And that just kind of depends. Do you know how to improve your credit? Do you know how to do this strategic financing forward and backwards? And I just kind of scratched the surface of it today. And how to get your seed corn back. You've got to be really, really smart about that and calculating your cash on cash returns and knowing what your total returns on your investment are, and how to do 1031 exchanges and negotiating good deals, and oh my gosh, the list goes on. Jason's really good at teaching you how to understand the anatomy of a home and the components, and then what order you should do these steps, and how to estimate the repairs on the spot. We love our investors to teach to teach them so that they can walk in, and we practice with them, and we walk in and you estimate those repairs on the spot, and then you can make an offer. I want that offer written when we're in that driveway of that house still, because that will get you a good deal, right? You snooze, you lose, right? You need to feel confident immediately afterwards to make an offer. You got to know how to evaluate the marketplace. You got to know these market timing principles. And you don't want to operate in a vacuum. You want to operate with a team of individuals and from different perspectives. And that's actually another reason why we're doing this nationally, because we want to be able to reflect to our investors. We just had an investor who was in a certain market, and they're actually going to look at investing in a different market because of where the market timing cycle is at right now, right? So do you know how to evaluate and identify multiple investment strategies? You should have 1 to 2 to 3 strategies for each property. If you just have one, you could get stuck, right? Who's your team of players? And how do you know how to deal with them and protect yourself? Because if you hire the wrong contractors, it can break you. It can break you. We've made expensive lessons along the way. We've even recently we had a known contractor that subbed under us who took advantage and cost us $10,000. And so, that could break you, and you don't want that to happen. And we know how to manage a team. Every once in a while things happen, but if you don't manage, some forms and things like that to keep you protected, you will get in trouble with this, right? 1031 exchange principles, tax principles, how you don't have to, deductions, those kinds of things, so you pay less tax. And how do you secure tenants and establish fair market rent? How do you screen them? Do you know the components of your lease? And do you know whether to hire a property management company or not? And do you know how to minimize your risk for a lawsuit with tenants? Because I'll tell you, if you're ever accused of discrimination, you might as well just deed over everything you got, because they're going to get it all. They're going to get it all, and they'll come in on busloads to crucify you. I've seen this happen before with people. It's never happened to us. We've never even been accused because we're very careful in making sure we minimize our risk there. But as I said, we've got some gifts for you today, and this one I didn't even mention before, and we have a special gift. We have set some time aside personally to talk to you about your real estate investment business. And this call is for everybody. It's not just for investors, it's for realtors. We're coaching realtors to build. I'm committed to helping there be a great realtor force out there to serve clients long-term throughout the United States. And for investors, we coach you nationally. We can do that very effectively. Technology makes it very easy for us to even be inside properties with you these days. And but we talk to you free of charge, and what we're going to talk to you about are your goals, your dreams, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, identify any roadblocks, and come up with a strategic plan. But as I said, I've got another gift for you today, and that's a complimentary copy of my book. And I need you to email me directly. I don't want to assume you want a copy of the book. And that's my direct email, terry.records@gmail.com. And I'll stick you on the list, and when it's good, I will send you either an audio book or an online book, whichever version you prefer at that time. So, like I said, we will explore on that call your dreams, your goals, and identify any roadblocks. And what you just need to do is, the call is for anybody who has a dream or a goal for the future, and you're willing to take some steps to achieve it. And you've got to be open to feedback, and you're coachable. I mean, otherwise, I can't help you if you don't want help, right? Are you willing to take some steps to invest in your future? I mean, we do. Sometimes the right person isn't there at the right time, and you've got to find the right, take advantage of them when they are, right? If you heard some concepts that resonate with you today and you feel compelled to speak to us, we'd love to talk to you. And again, you just call us at Terry and Jason, set an appointment up in my schedule at terryandjason.com/apply. And you will go directly into my schedule and book a time. You'll get a little questionnaire. You just fill it out so I know a little bit more about you, and I can tailor our talk to be even more specific and direct in helping you. Now, I did say that we've got a bonus gift for you, and here's Jason about to get on a roof And we have a copy of my upcoming book available. As soon as it's available, I'm going to send it to you via whichever way you'd like, either audio or an online version. And that's the book from 5,000 to 6.5 million. You can too. Remember, it has actionable tips that you can apply to your business today with real estate. And so just email me at Terry with a Y, I'm not a guy, .records@gmail.com, and I'll stick you on the email list for that. Now, as I said, we are really, really thankful to be here today. We love the opportunity to talk to you. We're thankful that you listened, and we'd love to hear from you and learn more about you and what's going on in your life and your community. And so it's your American dream. Let's discover it together. TerryandJason.com/apply. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the streets. Bye.